that even the heads of state in that particular closed meeting will realize how far Raila Odinga has gone, how far he has gone for Kenyans, standing for Kenyans. But what would be the political shift back at home? We will not close and let, the gentleman in studio leave without just analyzing what might happen to the political landscape. You have heard all the things that I've said. Professor Midamba, let me start with you. Based on Raila Odinga's positions or political affiliations in the country, or what's the shift?
Okni, let me say this. I was active, very active, on the conflict between Kibaki and Raila. Mm-hmm. And the good reason, the good news is that Condoleezza Rice was my classmate. And at that time, she was the Secretary of State. And so when I pick up the phone and call her, they were on the cross to make up decisions on which candidate to support. Whether it was Kibaki, it was Raila. And I said, you people sitting in Washington, and Kenya is about to ban. Mm-hmm. If you make decision about one or the other, the country will burn. You need to really balance the decisions you are making in the State Department, yes, and ultimately what the president will say. She said, Midamba, I want a group of you to get together and write a white paper. We spent 1 month in Washington, D.C., dealing with Condoleezza Rice, writing papers, and a number of Kenyans who came, leaders who came to Kenya, to Washington to lobby matters. And we recommended a very inclusive position, which is don't support Raila, don't support Kibaki, but take a position on bringing them together, whether to form a coalition government, mm-hmm, or one or another. They have to work together, because if they don't, the country is going to burn. Jendai Fraser, who was Assistant Secretary of State, also went to school with us, but she was behind us.
All right.
And she had taken position to support Kibaki, because she knew Kibaki before. Well, eventually, our paper got passed on to Kofi Annan.
Okay.
And then the team that then worked out an agreement. So the issue, what I'm saying, these people are getting very excited, mm-hmm, about the role of Raila, the stature of it. What they're getting excited is in that instant, Raila could have taken a very negative stand that I cannot work with Kibaki. And then the country will burn. And it has happened in many instances. So that's the reason these people are so excited by saying the word enigma. Mm-hmm. Enigma means he will walk to any prime minister's office or president office in Africa, and then you don't need to ask where were you born and where you coming from. That is the person we need as the chairman of AU. We don't need a technocrat who is well known in foreign policy. I have foreign policy. Peter Kagwannja can be the chairman now. Okay. I can be the chairman now. Mm-hmm. But Peter and I are not enigma.
Okay.
That is the issue.
Barack Muluka, in as far as this is concerned, when you gave your preliminary remarks, you said some sort of political play that's happening. Letting Raila Odinga go to Addis Ababa would clean some way out for certain politicians back at home, is it, if I heard you correctly? And how would this then play out in his victory or if he loses? Because we're looking at two outcomes that are probable outcomes here. So the strategy of having Baba exit politics, if it really is one of those strategies, or if they plan that way and he loses and has to come back, what are the possible happenings back at home?
Yeah, first the enigma, and maybe let us travel, yes, along that path. For me, an enigma is a paradox, basically a difficult person to understand. That is what I would understand, mm-hmm, by the notion of enigma. which is slightly different from that of Professor Noah Midamba. But you know, we went to different schools. So,
all right, Dr.
Give it to
you. That's said and done. That somebody would like to transmigrate Raila Odinga from the Kenyan political scene is not in doubt. It's very clear that people don't just wake up one morning. They have had an epiphany, a moment of revelation, that suddenly this person whom you have been berating, whom you have scolded, using all manner of pejoratives, is suddenly a very good person. That's what I understand Professor Peter Kagwannja to be saying when he says he was pushed. He did not jump. In other words, if you go outside Nyayo House tomorrow morning and you find there's a body out there, you could speculate and say, did this person jump from the 20th floor, or was he pushed from the 20th floor? And there's a sense in which we need to differentiate very clearly between what we wish for and what could happen. What we wish for, we have stated categorically that Raila Odinga should win this seat. All the reasons have been given. Now, if he wins or he doesn't win, there are ramifications of a political nature back at home. If he doesn't win, God forbid that he doesn't win, he will of course come back home, because this is the place that he knows as home. And there will be those who are thinking that he should retire from active politics, that this is his last dance. I think they are wrong, and they should be discouraged from that kind of thinking. For if he comes back home, he comes back home to pick up where he left off. And if we as a country have thought that he is good enough for us to offer to the continent as the chair of the African Union Commission, then we must be willing to accept that he's still good enough to run for office in Kenya, including the office of president. And I would expect that he would be gathering his troops again and having another go at it. In the event that he wins, I think there is that expectation within certain political quarters that they will then have consigned him to political Siberia, and that therefore he vacates that space for them. I think succession things do not play out that way. Within the space in which he has been, we are already seeing the tectonic plates playing around one way or the other. Of course, the president would want to go to his strongholds and say that, you see, I delivered, and therefore I need to take over that which was his, and therefore everyone support me. If he loses again as a final footnote, we could see the NADCO things coming back if they're still on in bonhomie with the president. If he is not, then you are likely to start hearing some people saying things like, this is a perennial loser, this is a person we bent backwards over to support, that you saw how many members of parliament we took to Addis Ababa, you saw how many governors we took to Addis Ababa. And other pejorative remarks of that kind.
Very, 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 very intriguing. Let's hear from Kagwannja. Same question, really. Through your lens.
My thoughts.
Yes.
Obviously, if you have been on the Kenyan political terrain long enough, No, not like my brother who spent 40 years in the US. If you have been this terrain,
why are you attacking me?
Are they attacking you, Professor?
No,
he volunteered that information.
So you are saying, if you are lived long enough in this political terrain and not 40 years abroad, there is something you know, that our politics starts the day one raises the Bible and say, I, then the next minute, the politics for the next election begins. So I see the problem I have generically with Kenya's role in this whole thing is that we are leading our politics into it, and we are drawing our political strategies into it, and that the end product is actually not Raila winning, because you asked about Kenya, who wins. I think Kenya will win, because if Raila wins, we are going to get $186,921 every year, which translates to 2.4 million Kenya shillings every month. If he spend it here.
Are you talking about his
salaries? His salaries, and you know, if he spend it here, but definitely it's going to benefit the Ethiopians, because he'll be spending much of it in Ethiopia. So that's one. But the real gain is for those who will, benefit from Raila Odinga being in exile. I saw Dramini Zuma.
Exile?
Yeah.
Basically exile.
Are you talking, for clarity, the AUC chair position, you are referring to that as well?
Yes, it has been used perennially as a position of exile. Can I say?
Yes, sir.
Alpha Konare went there because they had said they wanted a president. He had served 2 terms, so for him it was not exile. Jinping was a challenger to the president of the time. He moved to the AU. When he was defeated, he went back to fight for the position, and he almost got it. Had he stayed in Gabon, he would now be the president of Gabon. Then Dramini Zuma was to challenge for the leadership of the ANC. She went to Addis Ababa for 1 term. When she went back, she fought with the Cyril Ramaphosa, almost defeated him, but she has been away for too long. Mahamat is from the royal family. He was a deputy prime minister. He was now going to go for the big seat. He was pushed to this way. So now, one is very clear that if Raila wins this seat, he will not be there as a candidate in 2027. There's a possibility he can come back, but even if he come back, he'll be too weak, because he'll be out of the country for too long, and his political movement will have been dismantled, or will have dismantled itself.
Or inherited.
And so the issue is, I have delivered Raila. What is in it for me? So in it for me is you inherit my backyard, including, while he is away, the ripening fruits I can eat legitimately, because he is not there to eat them anyway.
Yes,
so in other words, there is a huge political game here, which one may not want to see, but that is it. Now, if that is the real game, that is what makes this whole thing immoral. Any political game, because we are really talking about a seat in the African Union at a time when we need, people who can really babysit. You babysit, because Musa Faki has done his work. But there are certain issues that are really terribly bad. And they need somebody who can babysit. Somebody who is young. If I want to look at the 3 candidates,
yes,
when the leaders sit down, Richard Radramandroto might be the next CEO of the African Union.
So you're saying Richard might take this
now, the reason is, when they begin to sober up, for us, we are looking at it from the Kenyan perspective. The others, Djiboutis and others, are looking at it from this perspective. When we sit as Africans and begin to think as Africans, we think about who is going to steady the ship. Who is going to keep the ship steady. So the competition finally will be between the 2 young people.
Why would it be Richard? In fact,
I'm saying the competition is going to be between Yusuf and Richard. That's the final competition. And we are going to watch it here. Now, I'm reading the African mind. Why? Because people are going to assess what Musa Faki has done. and where he failed.
Right.
Why Sudan is now in chaos. Why DR Congo is in chaos, and in the Dar es Salaam process, he could not be, his people had to talk whether he's going to be in or not in. And he's the CEO of the continent. Now, when you ask me whether Kenya is able to do this, and my friends and others are saying, Raila is experienced, this is not a child's breakfast. This is a very serious business we're having here. And Kenya need to take Africa very seriously.
All right.
And I'm speaking as an African. Yeah. We need to take Africa more seriously than we are doing. Because if we did, we would have gotten somebody who would do the job. Raila would have done a good job as a ceremonial leader, because that is his time now. With all his wisdom, babysitting us, and even he come back. The people who are going to benefit are ourselves, because we are going to drink from his wisdom as we get into politics, now to steer the Kenyan ship.
Okay. A hint of, I'm not sure where Professor Kagwannja is headed politically.
I'm headed to basically drink from his wisdom.
Okay.
Yes. So,
joining my party.
Kind of.
I'll hear from Professor Midamba, but outgoing AUC chairperson Musa Faki apologized earlier for missed opportunities and mistakes during his 8-year tenure that was marked by coups and conflicts across Africa. I'm just bringing that in, as of course he had spoken to that matter, that he apologized for those missed opportunities and mistakes during his 8-year term, where we also saw coups and conflicts across Africa, some of which are still, happening.
Including his own country.
They are hot.
They're hot. Barack saying they're hot. Midamba, I know we're about to close. Yes.
I want to push aside this notion that Raila is pushed. And I want to tell my two friends that they have absolutely no idea who Raila Odinga is. Raila is an age mate of my older brother.
He's a jumper.
Old mate. And they were very close. And there's no question. He's close to my family. But I don't know him. I see him from a distance. I only met him several times. Raila has several options, which I said earlier on. One option is to go to Bondo, relax there with his grandchildren, and watch birds from sunset to sunrise. Relax. He doesn't need to fight. The other option is join clubs, play golf, learn to play golf, and just, with his friends, if we can travel anywhere you want to travel. The other option is to get in the dirt, of Kenya politics and continue fighting the way he has done it. And lastly, this position is what Raila has been dreaming for years. That is Pan-Africanism. Not many people are talking about Pan-Africanism anymore. The grand old folks like Kwame Nkrumah, Jamal Abdel Nasser, all those people are come and dead. They're gone. But what should have saved the continent of Africa, we step it aside and we begin fighting among ourselves. The famous Mao Zedong traveled in Africa in 1969 and said that Africa is ripe for revolution. He was not telling us to pick up guns and start shooting each other, but set the course of Africa. And what does Pan-African mean? What does African culture mean? And then set your course at your own pace so that we can develop Africa. We cannot continue following Europeans' model to come and develop this country. We must follow African model. That's what India has done. That's what China has done, and other countries. And therefore, Raila is not pushed. Secondly, Raila is not looking for a job. He's a billionaire. If you check how many billionaires we have in Kenya, he's not looking to be paid. That money has nothing to do with what he needs to do. And so we need to put aside, this is a man willing to give us his life on behalf of the interest of Africa. And that is what I want to say.
All right, I'll come back to you again, Professor Kagwannja and Professor Midamba, for your closing remarks, because I want to pave way for the Kiswahili team as well. You do realize we have brothers in Rwanda, Tanzania, DR, who will be speaking probably in Kiswahili. And of course, we just have that particular preview of what's happening in Addis Ababa. We're seeing that the delegates, dignitaries, heads of state are making their way into the House again, and they will be beginning very shortly. Remember, the reason why we're here today is just to actually give you the updates on this particular gigantic battle that we are looking at as a country. Really, Raila Odinga has been, fronted and backed as the candidate for Kenya in this race. Two candidates just running against him, or him against them. That is from Djibouti and Madagascar. But even as we also wrap up this conversation, I want to hear from, of course, Dr. Barak Muluka. And of course, with that, you'll also put together your closing remarks, because at the end of the day, this is a celebrated, one would say, politician in the Republic of Kenya. He has a whole history, a whole profile. And Kenyans today watching would just like to hear your closing remarks to this race. Of course, it can go anyway. You've said we could even have a break for as long as it is needed. But this particular elections would be free, would be fair, unlike what we have seen. And you've had Kenyans saying Raila has never lost. Some of them saying he has never lost. But even as you do, there is the role of the AU. This is where we're fronting. And you've said Africa should be united, etc. Somebody came out and said, EU is even more organized than the African Union. When it was AU and now AU, are we really, as a continent, serious to embrace the spirit of Pan-Africanism year in, year out? And you've seen all those AU former or AUC chairpersons that set precedents for the one who's taking position today. So in that larger context, we have a union that should be working in itself. Is it working for you as Daktari? And do you have faith in the AU really as we close?
I remain optimistic that one day African unity is going to be a reality. And when I talk about unity, I draw a very clear distinction between unity and conspiracy. Because unity is as good as the purpose for which people unite. In Africa, we have been talking about unity since the days of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. He wrote a whole big volume of papers this size at home, titled Africa Must Unite. And he made all his arguments about why Africa should unite. 6.5 decades later and going, we are still grappling with the notion of African unity. Basically because the African Union and its predecessor, the Organization of African Unity before it, as scholars have written, morphed into a conspiracy club for African leaders, heads of state and government, where their role is to cover each other's backs. I invite us to have a look at Ali Mazrui, the Africans, to look at David Lamb, the Africans, to look at Martin Meredith, Africa history since independence, and many other scholars who have addressed our situation. We have had you mention the European Union. The big paradox here is that Africa was in fact ahead of Europe in this discourse about unity. And in a sense, if you look at East Africa in particular, we had a community, the East African Common Services. Perhaps you can give a bit of credit to Britain, who were the authors of that, going far back into the 1940s, 1948. And if you look at the regional blocks, they seem to be working. They seem to, of course, with challenges here and there. ECOWAS seems to be working, South African community, in spite of all the attendant teething problems. SADC is working, but when you come to the mother body, the AU itself, it still has issues.
All right.
One of the best things that came out of that was the African peer review mechanism under the new Partnership for African Development agenda, NEPAD. It seems to have dissipated. I would like to hear a bit about that from the two professors. They tend to work a little more closely within that docket.
Okay.
I think that was one of the finest things that we expected to see coming out of the AU. Finally, the chair of the commission should not be apologizing for things that have not been realized, as Professor Kagwannja very ably and eloquently told us. Their role being in that executive, middle-level kind of arrangement within the entire organogram is basically preparing the agenda for the rest of the forums, the ministers, the ambassadors, and of course the heads of state and government. The chair is not the AU. The chair is not the one who is solving issues. And the interests, the vested interests, the stakes. For example, right now, the African stakes in the war in Congo. And there's a whole volume of papers titled accordingly, The African Stakes in the War in Congo, The African Stakes in the Horn, and elsewhere.
All right, thank you very much. Let me hear from Professor Kagwannja. Yeah, but very briefly, your closing remarks.
I think the transformation from the Organization of African Unity to African Union was a landmark in itself, because it was a more focus on what the 21st century requires. The 19th century and the 20th century were period for Africa's quest for freedom and fight for freedom, because you cannot do anything without freedom. The 21st century is about the economy, and that's why Agenda 2063, now in the second phase of implementation, is the best thing that has happened to the continent. It's enabling us to mix with others. The AU now is a member of the G20 on behalf of the continent. The AU is developing agenda for now 3 African states, the pivotal states in the BRICS, and Nigeria and Kenya are on the way to becoming members of the BRIC. FOCAC is the most successful Africa +1 grouping with a lot of resources involved in it. That's the China-Africa Cooperation. And NEPAD has been absorbed within the African Union as a driver. A weaker version, but more sustainable, because there were ideological issues around NEPAD. So the African Union cannot be written off.
All right.
It is still work in progress,
as we wrap up,
but it is doing well.
All right.
Finally, if Raila gets there, I am sure he's going to do something about jigging it up. But if he comes home, we'll welcome him again to build the shrine here at home.
Shrine.
Thank you.
It's a place of worship.
Yes, thank you, Okni, for giving us this time to have a very good debate with my friends who are high intellectual that we have in Kenya. We have reached a defining moment for Kenya, defining moment for Africa, to ask several questions. Why this continent not moving further than the founding fathers anticipated? Europe is trading with each other at 75%. Asia is trading with each other at 50%. Africa is trading with each other at 15%. We need to move from where we are to the next step so that we can conserve and project the image of Africa. And we thank you for giving us that.
Thank you very much. There has been a whole team behind this, making this a success. We started all the way in the morning. KTN is dedicated to ensuring that you're not left out in this particular race happening in Addis Ababa. But allow me to appreciate and remind you the quotes of the first president and prime minister of Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah. We have mentioned him over and over again, being a Pan-Africanist. And he said, I am not African because I was born in Africa, but because Africa was born in me. All right, let's see how that race goes. I want to appreciate Professor Naomi Damba, who is the Senior Associate Global Center for Policy Strategy and Chairman, Moi University Council, Dr. Barak Muluka, a political scientist, Professor Peter Kagwannja, CEO, Africa Policy Institute, for such a lengthy and deep conversation. We will have you again, whether he wins or he loses. I want to pave way. Okay. Gentlemen, I shall leave the studios now, but remember, we pave way for the Kiswahili team. My colleague Yeri is already here, looking very good, coming to you shortly with that coverage in Kiswahili. But as I leave, Chanji, our reporter Chanji in Mombasa, engaged the residents of Mombasa, essentially just sharing their anticipation, expectations, even as Raila Odinga is in this race today. But of course, we'll also cross over to Clement Masombo, who also equally engaged the residents in Nyeri and gathered some reactions and expectations. But now, as I leave, my name is Anki Doris Umbat, and here is Chanji from Mombasa. Chanji.